To do Indian Guides, Indian Princesses with my kids. It later changed to Adventure Guides, Adventure Princesses. And a bunch of dads were standing around talking while the kids were out playing. And one of the dads said to another dad, and I don't remember their names, it was like, "Joe, you're married to a younger woman, what's that like?" And he goes, "Well, I'll explain it this way. When she wakes up in the morning, if something hurts, she wonders what's wrong." The implication is he wakes up in the morning, every morning, and something hurts because that's normal. Okay, that's the difference between a young person and a older person. Understand that as stressful as it is to have 4 tests in one day or all these projects due at the same time, life is probably going to be more stressful when you get out. You're going to have to learn to deal with stress. I'm not trying to paint a blurry picture for y'all, because it's not continuous stress, but there will be times where the car's broken down and the kids are sick and a major project's due at work and you just put a huge down payment on a new house or a rental property or something else, and there's not a whole lot of cash left in the bank account or whatever. The bad things always seem to come all at once. And when you get out, it's more than just academics that you're dealing with. So learn to deal with stress. Learn to leave a legacy. Do things that will have an impact on society and your family and the world you live in after you're no longer there to make a contribution. I talked about the Adventure Guides, Adventure Princesses. That's something I started in this town through a YMCA in Houston. It's still going on strong today, even though we're not doing anything with it. I'm hoping that someday I get to go camping with young Henry in the Adventure Guides program, and we'll be able to see a whole lot of boys, and maybe if there's a granddaughter someday, girls, on a camp out from Bryan College Station, knowing that they're there because I set up that program in 1996. Lee Lowry puts this after all his messages, and I think it's really, really appropriate. He says, "You will find when you die that that part of yourself that you gave to others does not die with you." And so keep that in mind. Figure out what's important in your life and devote time to it. Okay, understand the urgent versus non-urgent, important and non-important. Don't get caught up in doing urgent work that's really not important. The quality time is spent on not urgent but important. I was up really, really late last night working on something very important that had fallen into this urgent category. I'd be doing a whole lot better job on that work if I'd been able to find the time to devote more time to it throughout the semester when it wasn't quite so urgent. I talked a little bit at the beginning about priorities, and I talked about God, family, my service to others, my job. I tend to put myself last at that list, although I'm starting to move up on the list of priorities. I've finally gotten to a point where we've got a little bit of money to spend on ourselves, and the kids are gone, so we have a little bit more time. My wife and I actually enjoy just sitting on the back patio when the weather's nice and just sitting there visiting, because we didn't get to do a lot of that when we were shuttling kids all over the place. I've had students over the years come to me and say, "I'm just agonizing over which of these 5 job offers to take." And I invariably will say, "Are you engaged, or are you planning to get married?" And say, "Oh yeah, we got all that worked out." I said, "Well, how much time did you put in that decision?" "Oh, that was easy." I said, "No, actually the job decision's easy. The marriage is the tough one. Keep your priorities in order here and figure out and remember what's hard and what's not." And there's the classic line no one ever said as they were about to pass away, "I wish I'd spent more time at the office," because they're generally not surrounded by all the coworkers they ever had in their life. They're surrounded by their family. Another way to state that, though, is I spent my whole career climbing a ladder only to get to the top and find out I'm on the wrong ladder. Tell people around you that you appreciate what they've done for you in your life. Start with your parents. Okay? I don't know how many of y'all have ever told your parents, you know, I really, really appreciate everything you've done for me on some day other than Mother's Day or Father's Day. Okay, writing that in a card is obligatory. Tell your parents at some other point of the year that you appreciate that. Tell others too. You know, if you're working late one night when the janitorial staff's coming through your office or early in the morning to empty out waste baskets, tell them thank you. Let them know you appreciate the work you do. Make sure you have friends. Life can be very difficult to go through if you don't have a circle of friends to interact with. Now, family can be your friends, okay? But you need social interaction outside of just your office group. Now, some of your friends may be your work friends, but understand when you change jobs, most of those people may not continue to be your friends anymore, and you don't want to have to start over from scratch. Kirby.
How do real friends work when you're like an adult man that has kids? Because I feel like a lot of, like my dad and his friend, like, or my friend's parents, like, don't really have friends. Like a lot of, like, I wouldn't say they're friends.
Well, okay, so this is one of those do as I say and not as I do. Our interactions tend to almost all be family oriented, and for a lot of families, that's where the focus is. But I know guys that get together and they have poker nights, or they go out hunting together, or travel on sporting events. I know some women who have girls trips, and a group of them, they'll go on a cruise, or they'll do other stuff. And that works for some people. Other people, you focus so much effort on your family that you don't have a whole lot of time to socially interact with others. I know that my circle of friends varied based on what our kids were doing. When I was doing the adventure guides and adventure princesses with my daughter first and then my son, the interaction with the other dads, while the girls were either out playing, the girls would play in this little group pretty close to camp. The boys would scatter everywhere. And we really had to pay attention to where they were going, because they'd go out in the woods and build forts and run around and go on rampages and attack the other groups. And, you know, they were boys being boys. The girls actually were extremely well behaved. But the dads, we just sat around and visited and enjoyed each other's company. The same thing happened at baseball games. When my son started playing baseball, the parents started interacting in the stands, and we'd go out to dinner together. So a lot of times your circle of friends ends up being the parents of your kids' friends as well. All right, save your money. I talked about finances being stressful. When do you think you need money the most?
All the time.
You don't have
Later in life.
when you
Out of school.
Okay.
Good.
When you have kids, the outflow starts increasing dramatically, okay? Because there's diapers and car seats and baby food, and they outgrow their clothes every 3 months, and you got to buy new clothes, and it goes on and on and on. And then guess what? Then they become teenagers, and now prom dresses cost $400 or $500, and baseball lessons are $35 for half an hour, and cellos cost $4,000, and it goes on and on and on. And then they want to drive. Okay, the last thing you want to do for your teenager who's just gotten their driver's license is buy them a new vehicle. Go out and buy them a Rent-A-Hulk, okay? Something that's already beat up, because teenage drivers are not the most careful drivers in the world. They don't have driving experience. You buy that brand new vehicle, it's not going to be brand new condition very long. You know, you as a parent, you get that vehicle, you're going to take care of it. I don't know how many of my kids' parents ended up buying that and then come to regret it. So Teenagers are really expensive. And then guess what? They go off to college and it costs tens of thousands of dollars a year to support them in college. Unless the kid is putting themselves through school. In which case, you're already starting out in the hole before you ever have kids because you've got college debt you're trying to repay. And then you retire. You can't retire with $10,000 in the bank. Okay? You want to have $1 million, $2 million in savings. Okay? If you have $1 million in the bank, what does that give you to live on with interest? What's the assumption?
$100,000 a year with 10% interest.
You're not going to get 10%. What most financial advisors right now are saying is you can assume about 5% return. So that gives you $50,000 a year to live off of if you save $1 million. $50,000 is not a whole lot of money. Okay? So, oh, I forgot about this one. Every now and then there's a catastrophic illness that can literally wipe out your savings. So the best time to save money is between the time that you start your job and when you have kids. That's a fairly narrow window, and you want to save as much money as you possibly can, put it into a retirement account, and let the compounding start taking effect. If you can put aside $20,000, $25,000 a year, let that grow, it will be a very nice nest egg when you're 65 or so. Over 40 years, that will increase to a nice nest egg. Don't go out and go into debt buying a car and a bunch of stuff on your credit card and jack up your credit card debt and all that other stuff. Buy a car that you can afford without going into debt, or keep driving the one you've got, and pay off your credit card bills every month and save your money. That is hard to do because society discourages that kind of behavior, but that means you'll be able to retire when you're 55, 60, 65 years old. And when you're that age, which y'all think that's going to take forever to get to, it'll be here before you know it, you're going to be glad you have that money. All right, never stop learning. Okay, if you get a PE license, you're going to be required to submit hours every year. But if you quit learning, you can't be an effective engineer. And it's not just technical learning, it's the life lessons. Remember, a wise man learns by the experiences of others, an ordinary man learns from their own experiences, and a fool learns from nobody. So don't be a fool. Take ownership of your environment. Okay, if you see trash on the ground at the place where you work or walking across campus, pick it up and throw it away. It doesn't take that much extra effort. Keep your house neat. Make your house one that the neighbors are glad you're part of the neighborhood, not the one that goes, oh, I wish they would move out of here. No one wants that person in their neighborhood. Appreciate differences in people. Okay, understand that a lot of times your best decision will come when you hear a variety of opinions on the matter. If you're in charge of creating a committee to make a decision and everyone you put on that committee feels exactly the same way you do, what's the point in having the committee? Okay? So seek out differences of opinion and try and consider all different perspectives. And understand that just because someone feels differently than you do doesn't mean you have to create a divisive environment. We had a good example last night here on campus of some pretty divisive sets of opinions, and based on what I've heard, it was handled remarkably well. We want to try and not let that, this is where sometimes the so what test applies. Okay, remember, moderation in all things. Don't go overboard on any one thing. You may be a marathoner, and that really promotes a healthy lifestyle unless you try and run a marathon every weekend. Okay, that can wear you out. Too much of anything can actually be bad for you. Also understand that engineers are not normal. Yeah, that's good and bad, but people will look at you differently than when they know you're an engineer. And most of the time that will be with a level of respect and appreciation for your analytical skills. But every now and then you're going to be considered a pain in the rear because of your attention to detail and analytical skills. So it can be frustrating to others. The world is not always a problem waiting to be solved. All right, so everyone put their name on a sheet of paper, and sometime later today I'm going to send you an online evaluation. I'm halfway through, so let's keep going. So I'm going to speed up a little bit. Now that I've covered the personal rules, here are the business rules. When you start working, you're going to spend 50% of your time writing, 50% of your time in meetings, and 50% of your time doing analysis and other technical activities. What does that tell you?
You don't have enough time.
You are going to end up having to put a lot of effort into your job. It's not, I show up for 40 hours a week and sit around. Engineers get paid because they produce. Communication is the key. I can't emphasize enough how important communication skills are. And it's not just the formal communication, but it's even things like text and emails that become important. So learn how to write a good email. Proofread your emails before you send them. You cannot be an effective engineer if you're at your desk all the time. You will learn an awful lot about engineering design by getting out into the world. See what your designs look at. One of the great disadvantages of being a consultant is you design a project and then the project gets built. And who has to live with the project that you designed? The agency or the client that you designed it for. If you work for an agency and you do a design, you're also dealing with the consequences of that design, whether it be good or bad consequences. Agency work is actually a really good way to get a good picture of the overall engineering perspective, and you become a lot more valuable to consultants if you have agency work. I can't understate the value of working for a government agency early in your career. Remember, good, fast, and cheap, you get to pick any two. That applies to life issues and it applies to engineering issues. So if it's good and fast, it won't be cheap. If it's good and cheap, it won't be fast. And if it's fast and cheap, it won't be good. I saw this in an auto repair shop, but I've applied it to a lot more than auto repair. Perfection is the enemy of good. This is something I really struggle with. I spend a lot of time and have in my life trying to make things perfect. And sometimes that's to the detriment of my overall productivity. Sometimes you just got to finish it even if it's not done. But also understand, I'm not saying to just spit the stuff out the door. You want to try and make it the best you can possibly make it. This is going back to that tendency of engineers to try and turn everything into a problem to be solved. Decide whether you want to be a builder or stopper. That's my wife's, who used to be a kindergarten teacher. That's her kindergarten language. Are you being a builder or a stopper? A builder tries to find solutions to make things work well. A stopper tries to present everything as a problem that has to be overcome. So don't turn everything into a problem. Find solutions to what lies in front of you. Understand that average means you're like everyone else. You won't get noticed if you're average. A&M likes to think that every student at A&M is above average. Is that possible? Okay, what's the technically correct answer to that?
It depends.
It depends. It depends on what your sample and population are. If you're just talking about the students at A&M, then no, not everyone can be above average, because you've got the low end and the high end, and the ones in the middle are average. If you're talking about the entire population of people y'all's age, then yeah, y'all are all above average. But in the office place, if you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, your advancement opportunities are probably going to be more limited. I'm not going to read this whole thing. Calvin Coolidge was actually a president of the United States in the 20s, for those that don't know history going back that far. But the key to this is persistence counts for almost everything. You can have lots of talent, lots of education, lots of money, lots of natural ability, but if you're not persistent in trying to get things done, all of that, all those skills and capabilities don't mean anything. You have to work hard at it. Understand you're going to be hired for your technical abilities. You will be fired for your lack of people skills. That's the etiquette, the communication, the negativity kind of stuff. And you'll be promoted based on your management and leadership skills. So the people that can bring a team together and get them going and manage budgets and that kind of stuff will be the ones that rise to the top. Understand that what people think about you is the reality. It may not reflect the way you think of yourself, but if people form an opinion of you based on something that may be that much of a snippet of your life, to them that's reality. And because their perception impacts what they share with others, their perception becomes your reality. Mentors are very important. Mentors are different than friends. Okay? Friends are someone that you go out and socialize with. A mentor is someone you go to for advice. Okay? So who's y'all's most important mentors?
Parents.
Your parents. Okay? And now that you're in this adult relationship with your parents, it's okay to ask them about things like finances and child care and housing and all kind of stuff that you probably never really cared about their opinions on before. But you're going to need work-related mentors too. And make sure you have some that are not in your workplace. Because at some point, most people want to change jobs. And if you're ready to start changing jobs and want to get some advice from someone, you don't want to go to that senior vice president in your company and say, you know, I'm thinking about changing jobs. What advice would you give me? Because their advice may go, well, here's a box, clear out your desk. Okay? You need someone outside the company that can help you. In the real world, there's almost always more than one solution to every problem. So understand, my dad used to tell me all the time when I couldn't do something, he goes, well, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Heard that, I must have heard that dozens of times growing up. And he proved it to me dozens of times. Just understand that what you think is the best solution may not always be viewed as the best solution by others. The classic line in transportation engineering is in a public meeting where somebody bangs their fist on the table and says, how many more people are going to have to die before you do something about this? And I was talking to a traffic engineer that works for a public agency recently, and someone had said that at a meeting that was about a traffic signal, and the residents were wanting a traffic signal. And the intersection didn't meet the warrants. And when they banged that and said, how many people are going to have to die? He says, well, the answer is 5, because you have to have 5 crashes to meet the safety warrant. And I go, that's absolutely the wrong way. And he was laughing about it. It can be very, very frustrating to have people say those things to you, because engineers are conscientious and they try hard to do what's best. And they understand that what someone else thinks is best may not be the same. But sometimes in traffic engineering, it can be very hard to face a public that's calling you a child killer and environment destroyer, and all these other nasty things. And you just have to have a thick skin and accept some of that, and accept that what you think is the best solution may not end up being the solution that ends up getting implemented. Sometimes it's not about trying to make the most people happy. Sometimes it's about trying to make the least number of people unhappy. There's a difference there in the approach to that. Understand that your bosses' and clients' time is more valuable than your time. Okay, and your generation, the millennials, get a bad rap about that because they think they come in and deserve special treatment. I've never seen that in the students that I've had at A&M. So I think you get it. But when you go into your boss's office, understand they probably know more than they're telling you, and you need to be prepared with a pen and a notepad. Take that with you. Seek their advice, but don't waste their time. Try and figure things out for yourself before you go running for help. They want you to succeed, because if you succeed, that makes them look good. Understand that computer programs are not a substitute for your engineering knowledge and analysis. All they are is a tool. Do not misuse the tool. Okay? If your only tool is a hammer, everything becomes a nail. A program is not a hammer. A program may be a scalpel in some cases and a chainsaw in others, depending on which program it is and what you're trying to accomplish. Use a tool that's appropriate for the conditions and understand how it's being used. If you don't understand it, then figure it out or get someone who does know how to use it. This is one of my pet peeves, and I tell students this because you wouldn't believe how many people leave me phone messages and then say their phone number so fast that there's absolutely no way I can write it down. And if I have to listen to it 3 times to get it, and I can't write it down after the 3rd time, I give up. Okay? I'm going to assume if you're contacting me, you're smart enough to know what your own phone number is. You don't have to prove to me how well you know your phone number. What you have to prove to me is you can say it slow enough for this slow writing person to put it on paper without having to listen to your message 3 times. And so one of my recommendations to you is when you leave a phone message, start off with your phone number or your email address, if that's the key point, so that when they get to the end of the message and they have to repeat it to get the contact information, it's at the beginning of the message, not the end. How many of y'all have ever seen a supplementary experience record for a PE application? Anybody? Okay, Matt. You need to download these. Go to the engineering website, engineers.texas.gov. Before you start doing summer work or professional work, and make sure you understand the application process. That application process becomes significantly easier if you're filling this out as you do work. So, Daniel, you're working for Mitchell & Morgan, right?
Yes.
You should be doing this now. And who's working for Gessner? One of y'all's working for Gessner, aren't you? Okay, Alex. Same thing for you. Y'all are doing engineering work. You should be documenting it so that you don't have to worry about 4 years from now or 5 years from now when you start trying to put this together, figuring out what it was you did during that summer. Because it's a whole lot harder to remember something that happened 4 or 5 years ago. And if you document it well, it may actually count toward your engineering experience. If 3 or 4 years later you're trying to remember it and you don't do a very good job describing it, they may not consider it. So this is one of those important, not urgent activities that you should be doing when you're doing engineering work. Understand that engineers are appreciated for their technical accuracy. So be sure and be accurate in what you say and write. If you're not sure, don't say anything and don't embellish. I highly recommend, and here I am, I'm doing it with the word highly. I highly recommend you don't use adjectives like very and highly and significant in your engineering communications. What's the difference between saying we have a problem that needs to be solved versus we have a significant problem that has to be solved?
Or significant.
I mean, how that gets interpreted depends on who's interpreting it. Okay, the speeds on this road are way too high. You know, well, that can be interpreted by a whole lot of different ways by different people. And I promise you that lawyers will take the worst possible interpretation into the courtroom. So stick to the facts, and if you don't have the facts, then don't say anything. Okay, I mentioned the business world information that'll be on the website. It is 6 pages long. I don't expect you to read it today or maybe even tomorrow, but download it. I'd encourage you to print it out, and when you have a few minutes to read it. What's on this page is what I've highlighted in yellow on those 6 pages. And I'm not going to read all of them, but ethics, I've talked about ethics and morals. They come into play more often than you think. Let me tell you where this came from. Several years ago, I sent out a message to a bunch of professionals and say, what is it you wish your professors had taught you in college that they didn't teach? And I took all of their comments and I put it in a document. It came out to be 6 pages. Ethics, technical writing, character, and there's a bunch of other stuff in here. I like one of them at Walmart. The customer's always right, but this is not the case in engineering. Communications keeps coming up over and over and over. And if you haven't visited the site you're designing or analyzing, you've only performed half of your work. There's a whole lot of good tidbits there that are beyond advice.